Hi, and welcome to another album review. And today we'll be doing Tau Cross's self-titled album. Tau Cross is a supposed supergroup, even though I really hate that title. I think it totally takes away from the actual intellectual property of a band because you're constantly trying to compare it to the other bands that the members were in, and I think that's a big mistake. You know, you should never compare an actual work to another work of art because you're never going to be happy, to be completely honest. You know, it's never going to sound like the band you fell in love with. You know, you should always take it on what it is exactly. And Tau Cross, even though it has members of Amebix and members of Voivod, totally do not sound like either of the bands that they came from. It's a standalone work from start to finish of interesting heavy metal. And by interesting, I mean that it doesn't follow the normal mold. I actually found these guys from a website called More Fuzz. And More Fuzz is kind of dedicated to like doom metal, psychedelic, stoner rock. And these guys really don't sound like any of that. But, they kind of get put in that category because it has those kind of influences. And even though it has those kind of influences, these guys really take their time to give people something organic and new. And by organic and new, I mean that everything is genuine. You start off, Lazarus was the lead-off track. And you start off with Lazarus, and it starts off with this kind of weird synthy kind of music coming in. And even though you might think, it's kind of what Amebix does, they totally go a different route. And they come out with these really old school heavy kind of guitars. And even though there are these old school heavy guitars, they really space things out. It kind of sounds a little more progressive than most bands. And the singer, even though he often gets compared to Lemmy from Motorhead, and though, I could see why people would say that, he really has a much different range. He spaces things out. He allows his music to mold around his voice, which is great. Because I think a lot of singers overcompensate. I think a lot of bands overcompensate. And especially on debut records from supergroups, it's almost like they have this thing about them where they have to prove themselves. I have to prove that, I could do all this amazing stuff. This band has none of that. Like, absolutely none. They're amazing, but there's no showboating. There's nothing to prove. Lazarus, Fire in the Sky, each song generally has an organic flow to it. The entire album is very organic, and it shines from start to finish. I wish more bands and more supergroups, just in general, would go the path that these guys do, in order to make something inspirational and inspiring. It's inspiring to go your own route. See bands that might be a little more set in their ways go their own way yet again. I feel that, as far as this being on maybe 5 top 20 lists that I've seen so far, it's true to form. Not only are the choruses very punk sounding in a certain kind of way, they're melodic, but the guitars are very heavy, and they kind of do have that stoner doom feel, and the drums kind of mold between that, and they mold between almost like an industrial kind of feel. Like, this band literally can make these soundscapes that you're kind of like, is it this? Is it that? And you're better off not even trying to wonder. You're just going to like the record just on its own merits, I think. And I also think that they gave you a great package. The album itself depicts scarecrows in a graveyard, which, in Lazarus, they kind of talk about that in the lyrics, which is great. I also think the lyrics, though they might not be the most poetic thing on the earth, they're really evocative. which is great too. I mean, you really want to think about things you're listening to, and I think that that's a sign of a great artist, is something that you can listen to, and it brings pictures to your mind, which this band does with no hesitation, and it almost seems easy to them to do such a thing. Yet again, the last album we did was on Relapse Records. This album is also on Relapse Records, making it kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing that a record label goes out of their way to show their fans something new, which I really enjoy. I enjoy that, I get something new that I've never heard before. It really shows that there's someone out there still listening, still trying to find something genuine and give it to the masses. So, I mean, this album, start to finish, I say it's great. I can't wait to hear something new from them. I really think the progression from this album to the next one will be something totally genuine. So, as always, leave comments below, and please feel free to subscribe and share.